Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Hi Jason, I have a really hard time progressing on my bench press in comparison to all my other upper body lifts. My overhead press and barbell row are progressing well, while my bench is more or less stalling. I've added more direct chest work, which did help for a while, but now I'm stuck again. Perhaps I'm just not built for bench pressing. A 2-plate bench press still seems so far away. Help. My 5 rep max numbers, bench 187, row 195, overhead press 135. Thanks, coach. Yeah, your strength seems a little bit disproportionate there, but let me plug that in. 135 divided by 187. Yeah, you're not proportionate, because generally you want your overhead press for shoulder girdle stability to be about 2/3 of your bench press. So with that, you should probably be doing about 204, 205 with a 135 overhead press. So you're saying you're not increasing on your bench press, but your other lifts are going up. But here's the kicker. You gave me your list, but you didn't tell me what you weigh or how tall you are. And more importantly, you didn't tell me what you weigh. Also, I already know part of the problem here. You're doing direct chest work when you're only benching 187. And you're wondering what's going on. Well, that time you spent doing this extra direct chest work, you could have spent doing more bench pressing, right? You could have spent that time doing more bench pressing. So here's the issue we run into. You're either not working hard enough on your bench press, you're not eating enough, or you're not sleeping enough, because your overall strength seems to be going up, but your bench press is stalling and it is falling behind. We know, based upon all the data that's available, that the bench press is most tied to your body weight, and more importantly, most tied to your gains in body weight versus any more structural based lifts. In other words, lifts where you're standing on your feet. Those tend to be less dependent on body weight on a pound per pound basis. So the fact that you didn't list your weight tells me, okay, you didn't say, hey, I've gained 7 pounds while my bench press has been stalled. You didn't give me that info. You know, if you told me, hey, I've gained 7 pounds in the time period that my overhead press went from 115 to 135, because I've been keeping up with it, and my bench press hasn't increased proportionately, then there would be something to look at. But that's the interesting thing. You didn't list weight. So I can tell you right now, you probably are not eating enough. Probably your biggest factor. And if you know that you're eating enough and you're gaining weight, you're possibly not sleeping enough, or you're simply not bench pressing enough. You're putting too much extra effort on fluff exercises for your chest instead of just getting more time under the bar on the bench press and eating more. All right, it's usually that simple. All right, next question. I have been running your 5x5 novice program for about 5 to 6 months now. Already reached an intermediate bench press, 225 for 5, and a decent overhead press, 143 for 5. But still pretty weak in squats and deadlifts, 200 for 5 squat and only 240 for 5 deadlift. Should I take time off from benching and focus on bringing up those 2 lagging lifts, or should I continue running the program as it is? Body weight, 165. Wow, you've done really, really well on your pressing. If you're weighing 165 and 6 months into the program, you're benching 225 for 5 and you are standing pressing 143 for 5 at that body weight, you are doing exceptional. You're probably just built to press. You're just genetically probably have strong shoulders, strong triceps, strong pecs. You're just genetically built for pressing, especially at that body weight. That's fantastic. What I would say to you as far as correcting this balance goes, back down the bench and the overhead press to 3 sets of 5. Drop the 5x5, do 3 sets of 5. Stick with the same weight you're using. Don't add any more. Just work with 205 or 225 on the bench. Work with 143 on the overhead press, or drop them down a little, because that might be your maxes, is your 5 rep max. Keep them at a sustained strength level with slightly less volume, and continue running the program on the other lifts. Continue running the program on the other lifts until your squat and your deadlift are caught up. because what we want to see with that bench and that overhead press, we want to see your squat at 315 for 5, and we want to see your deadlift at 405 for 5. You're going to be just fine to spend a little while letting the upper body lag a bit while you get those lower body lifts caught up. Spend a few months doing it, 2-3 months. And if you don't have them caught up where they need to be at the 3-month mark, it might be time to switch over to an intermediate program for your upper body and continue to push some sort of novice linear progression for the lower body. You might need to go ahead and split your routine up a bit in order to make the best use of that. Because I know you don't want your upper body and your chest and triceps and all that stuff to stall for a long period of time. You don't want to do that. So again, 2 to 3 months. And if the lower body isn't caught up where you want it, consider going ahead and switching to an intermediate program for all your pressing while continuing a novice linear progression for your lower body. And that's what I would recommend. All right, next question. Hey, Jason. I know as a natural lifter, as the years go by, we get diminished returns in terms of muscle gains. However, I hear a lot of advanced lifters talking about training for muscle density, muscle maturity. Is this something an advanced trainee should be going for? I'm assuming this will give the illusion of bigger muscle. Thanks. Honestly, I don't know. It's hard to say what this is. I do understand what you're talking about. And I think what some of it has to do with just a shift over the years in the way that your body stores fat. Meaning, if you've been training for years and years, I think like your extremities and shoulders and all of that, you tend to store less and less fat under the skin and more of it in the muscle, and you make body fat gains as you train longer and longer. I think that's part of it. Again, that's a minor part of it though. And I think the other thing you're seeing that people are thinking of, they're calling muscle maturity, is that at a certain threshold, your big primary movers tend to really slow down. But I think over time, because you've been training for years, people try different exercises, they try different approaches. I think what you see in these people you're thinking of who've been lifting for a decade or longer, is they get older. What you are seeing is particularly when they're leaner. You don't notice it so much when they're not lean, but when they're leaner, it's just probably more the little smaller support musculature tends to build up more due to the variety of exercises that they master over the years, because they change through things. You know, guys might focus on squat, bench, deadlift for years, and then they start doing other stuff. They switch to other stuff for a while, different forms of pressing, different forms of pulling, maybe changing the type of squat they do, just whatever, variety of different exercises that do work some other little stabilizers and small muscles more. And I think over time, a lot of that is just seeing some of the smaller muscles build up, maybe certain muscles in the forearm, maybe their brachialis starts to build up a little more since their biceps not going to grow much more, just as they do more heavy rowing and pulling with a more pronated grip. Just little things like that probably just add up over time, and it creates a little bit more of what you're thinking of, that slightly more three-dimensional look, combined with just the fact that our skin thins as we age, meaning we don't store quite as much fat in certain parts of the subcutaneous area of the fat. It tends to go more towards visceral areas, or if you're training a lot, you do tend to start storing a little more of your fat in your muscle tissue over the years. So I think it's a lot of different factors that you're looking at, you're thinking of, that probably contribute to what you're talking about. I do understand what you're talking about, but I don't think there's a definitive answer. Those are just my theories on it. All right, next question. All right, and this question is being asked by none other than Devin Palumbo, who I understand is opening a gym in Florida coming up this month. Yeah, I might have to look into that further and shout that gym out, because Devin is an all-around good, strong guy. Known him for a long time. You guys have probably seen him and know him from training a bit with, gosh, what's his name? George Lehman. George's name slipped my mind. Of all people's name to slip my mind, George Lehman. But Devin asked, thoughts on going to failure every set with maximum intensity on a higher rep set of say 8 to 12 for building muscle versus maximum intensity for a few sets on a lower rep set of 1 to 5, but leaving a couple reps in the tank. You know what? I think when it comes down to just hypertrophy on this one, when we're talking about purely hypertrophy and not long-term performance, I think it's going to depend on which one gives you more total workload. In other words, if your 12 rep set taken to absolute failure gives you more total tonnage move than, say, 2 sets of 5, it's probably going to stimulate slightly more hypertrophy as long as progressive overload is present. But let me double check your question. Did you ask on a higher rep with every set? Okay, that's what it comes down to. Yeah, so we're talking about a set to set comparison. No, obviously the higher rep, the 8 to 12 taken to failure on a set for set basis is going to produce more hypertrophy than a set of 5 leaving some reps in the tank. But when we're talking about total volume done, we start going over multiple sets, we know the hypertrophy is equal. Now, the other thing we come down to, and this is the argument I always make with the strength training in the long term, the progressive overload factor. The lower reps do build more neural efficiency. You do gain more strength for every drop of muscle mass that you gain. Accordingly, that's going to allow you to increase the tonnage. And I think that's the difference, is that looking in the long term, I think the more strength-based approach is probably going to be able to produce equal, if not better, hypertrophy when stretched out over the long term. But if we're talking about relatively short periods of time, yeah, I think that higher rep taken to failure will produce a little more gains. Again, just my opinion on it based upon my observations over the years and looking at the scientific literature and things. It is what it is. All right, next question. What do you think of adding in greasing the groove for pull-ups? It's my understanding of about 5 to 6 weeks, 5 times a week, about the length of time it should be run. I'm trying to strengthen this movement to be able to do weighted pull-ups, chin-ups. Thanks. Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I like this. I've touted it before. For those who don't know, Greasing the Groove is written by Pavel Talsaline. You guys can Google Greasing the Groove. You can Google Pavel Talsaline. You're not going to be able to spell his name right. You probably do better just Googling Greasing the Groove. Is it a proven method for increasing the number of chin-ups and pull-ups you can do? Yes, absolutely. I think it works. I know it works. I've used it myself. It works. So if your goal is in a short period of time, say again, 4 weeks to 6 weeks, to increase the amount of pull-ups and chin-ups you can do very quickly, it works. It's a viable method. Give it a try. I endorse it for this goal. As far as getting stronger when doing weighted ones, well, if you go from being able to do 5 pull-ups to being able to do 10 pull-ups, you're probably going to be able to add weight easier at that point. That's basic common sense as far as work capacity and strength. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 3.